Joining me right now, GOP political strategist, co-founder of MustReadTexas.com, Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Chad.
How's it going?
Going great, man. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Thanks for coming on with us today. Let's take a look at what's happening in the Republican race. Donald Trump still number one with about 28% of Republican primary voters liking Donald Trump. He's had some controversial moments over the last, this entire time, but really over this last weekend, he's had some controversial moments. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with Donald Trump, some of the controversy out there, and just the power of Trump to stay on top right now.
Yeah, it is interesting. He's really stayed on the same general glide path that he's been on. Hasn't really seemed to be heard at all by any kind of developments. You've seen Carson go down. You've seen Cruz rise, both nationally and in Iowa. You've seen Rubio rise, but Trump remains in first place. In the past week, I guess the sort of the two biggest controversies are he was asked at an event about whether he thinks refugees or Muslims should be put in their own sort of database, and he generally said yes, and then he was asked about it again later, and he said yes. So, there's obviously privacy issues and religious issues related to that. It wasn't an idea that he proposed. It was something he responded to. So there's obviously a lot of questions about that idea and whether that's something he would really advocate for or not. And then secondly, he's made some comments about some thousands of people cheering in Jersey City on 9/11 when the buildings came down. And he was asked about that yesterday on ABC News this week with George Stephanopoulos. There's no record that that's happened, according to Stephanopoulos. There's no police record that ever happened, but Trump says it did happen. So, he makes these statements sometimes, and he obviously responds to questions, and he doesn't, he's a very unusual candidate, and some things that he does can be taken as bigoted or racist or whatever, but he just continues to sort of, plow ahead, and these things just generally don't seem to hurt him.
If you're working for the Rubio or Cruz camp, and you're looking at Donald Trump, and both Rubio and Cruz have seen increases in their polling numbers. You mentioned Cruz on the rise in Iowa, especially. How do you try to take on Donald Trump and knock him down? Because right now, nothing has worked.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it depends a lot on what kind of candidate you are. Your specific position. There was an announcement last week that John Kasich's super PAC is going to go after Trump. That doesn't hurt Kasich. He doesn't really appear to have much of a path right now. He's not much of a factor. So there's very little downside for his super PAC to do that. If anything, it probably brings him some attention and perhaps some new money. But look, other people have gone after Trump, and they haven't really done very well. That includes Perry, includes Lindsey Graham, even Jindal. There's a lot of people that try to, even Jeb to some extent, have gone after Trump, and they haven't hurt him. I don't think you'll see Cruz do that. I mean, he may draw a contrast here or there on an issue, but he'll do it in a very soft way. He always, even if he answers a question, and draws a contrast with Trump, he always says that he likes Trump first. He really wants to position himself to win that vote. Rubio is a little bit more of an interesting case because, his vote is not going to come from Trump, but he also doesn't necessarily want to have somebody with a large megaphone attacking him. So, I think part of this is all the candidates have had this belief that Trump isn't ultimately going to be the nominee, and that if you give him enough rope, he'll sort of hang himself rhetorically. I think he's doing that for the general election, but I don't think he's necessarily doing that for the primary. But my thesis from the beginning, Chad, is that when the field narrows to 2 or 3 viable candidates by late February, early March, Trump's 30 or 35% will not be enough. At that point, you've got to have 60 or 65% of the vote. And so I think Trump has a high floor and a low ceiling. His floor is say 20 or 22, and his ceiling is 35 or 38. But it's hard for me to see how he gets a majority of Republican primary voters by, let's say, March 15th, when the states are winner take all, and that's when the nominee's really going to be decided. February is about survival. March is about positioning yourself to win the nomination.
Visiting with Matt Mackowiak. Matt, we've talked a little bit about Ted Cruz, mentioned Ted Cruz, his poll numbers. How has he made things work in Iowa, where he is slowly but surely increasing his polling numbers and becoming a real player in Iowa?
Yeah, and honestly, they were very patient in Iowa. He wasn't the candidate that spent the most time there in the summer. He was there, often, but he was not certainly logging the most hours. You saw other candidates, Jindal, Santorum, others spend a lot more time there. But he's made investments around the country, but he's really peaking at the right time in Iowa. He didn't have his field staff in place till about a month ago. That's starting to bear fruit. He got the endorsement of Steve King, the ultra-conservative, hardliner on immigration congressman from western Iowa. It's a very conservative area. Their expectation is he will win the endorsement of Bob Vanderplaats, which will happen sometime between now and the end of the year before Christmas. Who runs the Iowa Family Leader, a socially conservative organization. Cruz has grown his base there. He's positioned himself to be the leading evangelical candidate. And going into this race, there was concern that he was going to split that vote with Santorum and Huckabee and Jindal and others. But he's really unified that vote behind himself. And so I think he's gone in and gotten some of Rand Paul's libertarian vote. He's got solid credentials as an economic conservative and as a national security conservative. But he's really made a very strong case to evangelicals. That he's one of them, that he will fight the big fights, and that he's been leading on those issues in the United States Senate. And he does it in a way that gives them confidence, not just that he will do what he says, but that he can actually win. And ultimately, that's, I think, what a lot of these people want. They want someone they can believe in, but they also want someone that can win the nomination and win the White House.
Well, when you look at Ben Carson, last candidate I'll ask you about, it seems as though his campaign is on its way down. Is that the right analysis, that his campaign is sort of it doesn't seem very strong right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I do think Carson does have a strong and deep well of support and positive feeling from voters. They like him. They want to see him succeed. He's very different from everyone else. He's an outsider. If you want an outsider but you don't like Trump, Carson is his opposite. And I think what's clear is his campaign has been totally ill-equipped to handle this moment where he was challenging Trump for the national lead, challenging for the lead in Iowa. He's really just been totally, had a total inability to sort of scale up, to handle the inquiries, to handle the questions. He's had questions about his biography. He's had questions from within his own campaign about his foreign policy knowledge. I saw this morning an absurd idea that he's thinking about taking a foreign trip somewhere between now and Iowa. You've got 65 days till Iowa, and he's thinking about spending a week abroad, which is insane, strategically insane. You go abroad in the summer, not with 60 days till Iowa, which could make the difference between whether he's viable or not going forward. So he just really has not run a good campaign. They've raised a huge amount of money from small donors. They've done very well in that regard. I don't think they've built much of a real campaign. And it's a real shame because he has tremendous potential.
Matt, what can people find on MustReadTexas.com going forward this week?
Yeah, a few stories about Cruz in Iowa, about the coalition he's built and the success he's had. There's a story from Bloomberg Politics about Ted Cruz's super PAC putting a field effort together in South Carolina this morning, and then I also have a column in the Austin American Statesman this morning about the so-called Equal Rights Amendment in Houston and what's happened in Dallas since that was soundly defeated in Houston. All that in the top news and opinion from around the state is available at mustreadtexas.com.
All right, Matt, as always, thank you, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Take care.
Have a good one. That's Matt Mackowiak. Follow him on Twitter at Matt Mackowiak there on Twitter.